In the heart of bustling Giza, where the noise of the streets blends with the voices of vendors and people passing without noticing each other, there lived a man among them. A man who didn't draw attention, polite, well-mannered, always smiling. But behind that calm face, he hid one of the most horrifying faces of crime in Egypt's modern history. His name was Gaddafi Farag Abdel Ati, a man in his 40s, a graduate of the Faculty of Law. But he never worked in law, nor sought justice. He was skilled at something else entirely: deception. His story started like any ambitious young man's. He opened a bookstore, traded in school supplies, launched a small toy factory. His life appeared normal, successful even. But behind the scenes, Gaddafi had begun a secret life filled with fraud, forgery, and murder. His crimes weren't spontaneous. They were carefully planned. He chose his victims with precision, people who trusted him, who loved him, who would never suspect him. That was what made him so dangerous. Everything began when he assumed the identity of his close friend, Reda. But what no one knew was that Reda had already been murdered and buried inside a wall years earlier. The police, when they eventually arrived at the scene, weren't looking for a serial killer. They thought they were chasing a low-level con man. But how did Gaddafi Farag get caught? How many victims were there? Did he really kill his wife, his friend, his secretary? And how did he manage to live for years using different names? This is the true story of the Butcher of Giza. A story that will take you inside the mind of the criminal and make you feel like one of the investigators who uncovered the truth. Reda Abdel Latif was a calm, well-mannered young engineer. He had been a close friend of Gaddafi since their university days. He trusted him completely, even investing a large sum of money with him to start a bookstore project. But Reda had no idea that the money he gave to his friend would eventually cost him his life. Months passed, and Reda didn't see any profits from the investment. He started to feel uneasy and began demanding his money back. Gaddafi, sensing the danger and not willing to lose everything, made a final, irreversible decision: murder. One summer day in 2015, Gaddafi invited Reda to his apartment in the Bolak al-Dakror district. The welcome was warm and friendly as usual. They chatted, shared a meal, and laughed together. But this time, the drink Gaddafi served him was laced with drugs. As Reda started to lose consciousness, Gaddafi picked up a heavy iron object and struck him hard on the head. Reda died instantly. Gaddafi then dragged the body into one of the rooms and began digging into the wall. He wasn't planning to get rid of the body in the usual way. He buried his best friend right there, inside the wall of his own apartment, and sealed it with concrete, as if nothing had ever happened. In the following days, Gaddafi began a new life, using the identity of his dead friend. He moved to Alexandria, opened a new bookstore under the name Reda Abdel Latif, forged official documents, and started living under this false identity. He even proposed to a woman while pretending to be Reda, but suspicions began to grow. "Where is Reda?" people started asking. "He's been missing for years. His family says he traveled abroad, but no one has seen him, and yet someone else is using his name." This was the first thread the police would eventually follow. But what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The next murder was even more disturbing. Fatma Zakaria was Gaddafi Farag's wife, a kind, religious woman who trusted her husband and supported him in his business ventures. But over time, she began to notice strange changes in his behavior: forged documents, mysterious phone calls, large amounts of missing money. Then one day, she discovered something she was never meant to see. She found documents hidden in his room, contracts with fake names, multiple fake IDs, and a passport with the name Reda Abdel Latif. That's when the truth started to reveal itself. She confronted him. She screamed. She threatened to go to the police. Gaddafi couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not after what he had already done. So he made his choice. That night, he laced her food with poison. And when she began vomiting and losing consciousness, he wrapped his hands around her throat and strangled her to death. Her body? He didn't dispose of it the usual way either. He buried her inside the same apartment. just a few feet away from where Retta's body was already hidden, in the same cold wall, the same concrete tomb. To cover up her disappearance, he sent a message to her family, claiming that Fatma had suddenly traveled to the Gulf for a job opportunity. He even used her phone to send texts pretending to be her, telling them she was safe. For years, they believed the lie. Then came the next victim. She wasn't a friend, she wasn't a wife, she was his secretary, someone who had simply seen too much. Nadine was in her 20s, smart, dedicated, and respectful. She worked as a secretary at one of the bookstores managed by Gaddafi. She saw him as a professional and decent boss, even a father figure. But Nadine started to notice things. Inconsistencies in the paperwork, contracts signed with different names, disappearances. She began to sense that something was very wrong. One morning, she arrived early at the office and found a file left open on Gaddafi's desk. Inside were documents with forged names, multiple IDs, and two that caught her attention: Reda Abdel Latif and Fatma Zakaria. She had stumbled upon the truth. Later that day, she confronted him. "Mr. Gaddafi, something isn't right. Who are you really?" He smiled. "Nadine, there are things you're better off not knowing. Just do your job." But she wouldn't stay quiet. She told coworkers she suspected something illegal. She threatened to report him. Gaddafi decided to silence her, permanently. He lured her to the same apartment where Reda and Fatma were buried, told her they needed to go over important paperwork. Once she stepped in, he locked the door. He struck her in the head with a metal object. She collapsed in a pool of blood. And once again, he buried her, right beside the others. 3 victims, 1 apartment. "This place isn't an apartment," one investigator would later say. "It's a tomb." And what came next would prove Gaddafi was far from done. Because when he moved to Alexandria, under a false identity, he committed yet another murder. After committing 3 murders in Giza, Gaddafi Farag knew the heat was closing in. He had to disappear. So he fled to Alexandria, but not under his real name. He assumed the identity of his dead friend, Reda Abdel Latif. In Alexandria, he started over. He opened a small bookstore, made new connections, and grew close to a kind young woman. We'll call her Yasmin. She worked with him and trusted him completely. Their relationship developed quickly. He offered her a partnership. She agreed and invested a large sum of money into the business. But over time, she discovered the same things the others had seen: missing money, forged documents, and worst of all, the truth: he wasn't who he claimed to be. "You're not Reda," she shouted. "I'm going to the police." He didn't flinch. He had been expecting this moment. Without a word, he grabbed her by the neck and strangled her with his bare hands. But this time, there was no apartment to bury the body. Instead, he used an old closed-down shop he owned in a quiet district of Alexandria. He dug a shallow grave in the store's back room and buried her there, alone, unmarked, and forgotten. Then he locked the store in and walked away. 4 victims now, each one murdered methodically, calmly, without remorse. An investigator later said, 4 lives stolen, and every time, he did it the same way. No panic, no hesitation, cold, calculated. But how did he finally fall? How did the police discover that this man wasn't just a scammer, but a serial killer? It all started with one small mistake that opened the gates of truth. In 2020, a woman walked into a police station in Giza. She told the officer, "I'm engaged to Reda Abdel Latif, but he's been missing for years. Suddenly, a man claiming to be him shows up and wants to marry me again." It sounded like a typical identity fraud case at first. But the officer sensed something wasn't right. The man's documents were all official, but his face didn't match the real Reda's photos. A quick investigation showed that Reda had vanished 5 years ago, and no one had seen or heard from him since. Gaddafi Farag was arrested. At first, he insisted, "I am Reda, that's my ID. What proof do you have otherwise?" But the police began connecting the dots. Reda's family confirmed he never traveled abroad. Another woman came forward, Fatma's sister, claiming the man was actually Gaddafi and her sister had gone missing years ago. Then another clue surfaced. A friend of Nadine's recalled that the young secretary had become suspicious of her boss right before she disappeared. The authorities obtained a warrant to search Gaddafi's old apartment in Bolak al-Dakrur. Hours into the search, they noticed something strange about one of the walls in the bedroom. The concrete looked newer, out of place. They brought in demolition tools, and behind that wall, they found a horrific secret: a decaying corpse, then another, and another. 3 bodies buried inside one apartment. "This isn't a home," one officer said. "It's a graveyard." From that moment on, the case changed completely. This was no longer about a con man or forger. This was Egypt's most dangerous serial killer in decades. Gaddafi Farag sat across from the investigators, calm and composed. The officer slid a file in front of him. Photos of the bodies, forensic reports, and witness statements. "We found the bodies: Gaddafi, Reda. Fatma, Nadine, all buried in your apartment." He stayed silent for a moment. Then he smiled. A small, chilling smile. "I knew this day would come," he said. "It just took longer than I expected." The investigators continued, laying out the evidence one piece at a time. Gaddafi didn't flinch. He listened. Then, he talked. He confessed to everything. He told them how he killed Reda after being asked to return the investment, how he murdered his wife Fatma when she discovered his forged identities, how he eliminated Nadine when she started asking questions, and how he strangled Yasmin in Alexandria when she threatened to expose him. He also described how he forged multiple ID cards, faked travel documents, and lived under various aliases for years. "They were weaknesses," he said. "Each one of them could have destroyed everything I built. I didn't kill out of hate, I killed to survive." A psychological evaluation later described him as narcissistic, emotionless, highly organized. He planned his murders with precision and showed full awareness of his actions. His voice remained cold, his gaze unshaken. When confronted with the families of the victims, he showed no remorse, no apology, just the same expressionless face. "I'm not sorry," he said. "I'm only sorry I didn't disappear sooner." The case was officially referred to court. 4 counts of premeditated murder, fraud. Forgery, identity theft. What came next would shock the public even more. The courtroom in Giza was packed. Reporters, lawyers, families of the victims. Everyone was waiting to see the man the media had now dubbed the Butcher of Giza. Gaddafi Farag entered wearing a white prison uniform. He showed no emotion, no signs of fear or regret. He simply sat in the defendant's cage, watching as if none of it concerned him. The prosecution laid out the facts. He murdered his best friend, Reda, after scamming him. He killed his wife, Fatma, when she discovered his secrets. He silenced his secretary, Nadine, when she got too close to the truth. And he strangled a young woman in Alexandria after defrauding her. They presented irrefutable evidence, detailed confessions, forensic reports linking the bodies to the scene, DNA results, testimonies from witnesses, and then came Gaddafi's moment to speak. He stood up calmly and said, "Yes, I did all of it. And no, I'm not sorry. They were all threats to my future." The court was stunned. His defense lawyer tried to claim he was mentally unstable, but the psychiatric report was crystal clear. The defendant is fully aware of his actions. He displays no signs of psychosis or mental disorder. His behavior is methodical and deliberate. The judge asked if he had any final words. Gaddafi said, "I don't regret what I did. I only regret not disappearing sooner." The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the sentence. By unanimous decision, the court sentences the defendant, Gaddafi Farag, to death by hanging. The victims' families wept, and for the first time, the nation could breathe. But the story didn't end there. The name Gaddafi Farag, the Butcher of Giza, spread like wildfire across Egypt. People talked about him in cafes, on the streets, in homes, and across social media. He wasn't just a killer. He was a man who lived 2 lives. A man who wore a smile, spoke politely, and hid unspeakable evil behind his soft tone. The biggest question everyone asked was, how did he live among us for years, undetected? How did he fake identities, forge documents, kill 4 people and still earn people's trust? How did he bury 3 bodies in a single apartment, and no one ever noticed? After his death sentence, Gaddafi was held in Al-Aqrab prison, one of the most secure facilities in Egypt. He refused visitors, he spoke very little, and he waited for the inevitable. But the story didn't fade with his sentencing. It was reborn through the screen.